Coming up, the NBA offseason is winding down and Cam Thomas remains without a contract. I'll tell you why his time with Brooklyn could be coming to a close after this.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. I'm Erik Slater, Brooklyn Nets beat reporter for ClutchPoints.com. Thank you for making me your first listen of the day. This show is 100% free on all those great platforms. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. And on today's show, I'm going to be breaking down Cam Thomas's future with the Nets. I'll analyze his skill set, how it fits in with what Brooklyn is trying to build, and why his contract negotiations could be a telling sign of things to come. Now, I'm joined now by Lucas Kaplan of Nets Daily for the second consecutive day because we are running through a series on the Brooklyn Nets rotation players from last year, talking about how we think they fit with the team long-term and whether we ultimately feel that they are going to be fits throughout this rebuild with the Nets. We did Nick Claxton yesterday, and Lucas, today we are doing Cam Thomas. So just a refresher for those of you who didn't catch our last episode. The premise for this, for Claxton and for CT, is this player being a starter. So for Thomas's case, a starting shooting guard. How do we feel about him in that role, assuming that he's being paid starting level shooting guard money, which in today's NBA with the new salary cap, probably somewhere between $20 to $30 million. So Lucas, a lot of uncertainty surrounding Cam Thomas's contract, but it's safe to assume that that is the role he wants. Starting guard, probably paying him somewhere in that range. It doesn't look like he's going to get it. But ultimately, long-term, if that's where he wants to be, how do you feel about him being in that position for a team that is trying to make a deep playoff run?
Well, it's interesting because you look around and he will look at Jalen Green making $35 million a year, Emmanuel Quickley in the same ballpark. These kind of guys that you can make an argument that Cam Thomas is just a better player than. And yet, there seem to me to be a lot of valid reasons that maybe he is not that caliber of player, of, piece to a really good playoff team. So I think that the market is maybe correcting at the worst possible time for him. And he might be getting screwed right now, but I don't think that it is unjustified, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. And I think this is poor timing for Cam Thomas. And I would understand the comparisons that he's had. Like, I've reported that his camp went into negotiations with some comparisons to guys like Jalen Green, Emmanuel Quickley, Jordan Poole, whoever you want to say, in those contracts. And with no teams having cap space, and also this being a new CBA, it just doesn't seem like he's going to get that. But in another world, there's a scenario where Cam Thomas gets paid on his rookie deal, like a Jalen Green or like those players that he's in a similar tier to, and it just hasn't worked out that way for him. And in his case, that could be, hundreds of millions of dollars that he lost out on. So I understand the frustration, but yeah, I mean, how do you feel about, because I think when you're talking about whether Cam Thomas is going to be a long-term starter in the NBA and with the Nets, it's interesting to see this offseason, the trend of NBA teams kind of going away from the off-ball scorers who are really like shot-first guys. Like, that archetype seems like it's being valued less than ever before, whether you talk about, guys like Norman Powell or Colin Sexton or Malik Monk, who's supposedly been on the trade block and really hasn't garnered much interest. Just all those different guys don't seem to be valued by NBA teams. So is that surprising to you? And do you agree with kind of that player archetype, how front offices are approaching with what their market value is supposed to be?
Yeah, it makes sense to me, and I generally do. Like, the bar to be the guy or one of the top two guys on a good NBA offense, 25, 30% usage is just so high. I mean, if you're not the A-plus passer playmaker, then you need to be scoring like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who I think we can agree is, maybe a tier 2, tier 3 kind of passer and floor reader, but can't say enough about his scoring. Maybe Jalen Brunson falls in the same bucket. And then on the other hand, you have all around playmakers that can do everything. Like you think about Jokic and Embiid when he's healthy, and who's become a great passer, and guys like that. So the bar is just so high to have the ball in your hands all the time for a really good NBA team. And the thing with Cam Thomas, and he's gotten better at pretty much everything you could have asked of him. Like he's, if not great, shown improvements in all these areas. And yet, is he good enough to have the ball in his hands all the time? Probably not. And if not, is he providing enough value everywhere else to command the $25-30 million a year on a really good team? Like, I think he's gotten better on defense and maybe better as an off-ball offensive player and, cutter and passer. But the answer, unfortunately, is no, probably.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily disagree with you. And I've spoken about this at length because I've done so much coverage of CT and the contract situation. And it really is just that. There's so few guys that can be on the ball. And if Cam isn't on the ball, where is he providing value to warrant the $30+ million that he wants in free agency? Those flashes in those other areas of his game just haven't been there up to this point. And we'll get into, each side of the ball. Let's start on offense, though. And let's just start with his scoring ability, because obviously that's the main calling card. And if you are going to be that, as you said, that, lead guy who has the ball in your hands, your scoring ability has to be just astronomical. And Cam has flashed elite scoring ability. There were questions about his efficiency that, went up to, I think, a little slightly above league average last season in the games that he did play in. But when you look at what he's done, how he's changed throughout his career, how do you feel about his scoring ability, the efficiency, and the process? Is it something where you think what he does in that area really warrants him having the ball as much as he's going to want to?
Yeah, I mean, last year he was well over a 30% usage, and I don't think that's a winning formula for 99.5% of guys in the league. And I'm not even saying that as a slight to Thomas. And, I don't even think if you asked him, do you want the ball that much? I don't think he would maybe be as excited about it as you might think. Maybe if he's on a more talented offensive roster, his usage goes down. And I think, for whatever you want to say about Cam Thomas, I think he would understand that. And if he's playing with Kyrie, he would defer some shots. KD, James Harden, these guys that he entered the league with. His offensive co-star, if he had one last year, was Cam Johnson, Dennis Schroeder. And then the off-ball guys like Keon, Tyrese Martin, these guys aren't creating shots. So I don't think his massive usage rate is totally a product of him being like, give me the ball, I want the ball. That being said, I think he's gotten to the point, I think he's a positive offensive player. There is enough catch and shooting. He's a really good, just catch and shoot guy from three, and that will always provide value. His last two games he played before his final hamstring strain were some of the best kind of floor reading, playmaking games of his life. 10 assists, I believe, against Chicago. And
in the last game of the season,
yeah,
it had to be for the CT discourse, it had to be the last game of the season just to leave us with that note of the last thing we see, Cam Thomas is scaling up the passing, and then he goes out for the season. But
of course. But it's so fitting for his career and Nets tenure. It's this could have been all year. But it matches everything. The assist to turnover, all that stuff, all the ancillary stuff has gone up. And, he's creeping right up towards, league average true shooting, if you want to use that as a very basic barometer for how efficient he is. So this is a guy that I think is a positive offensive player. And that is not quite enough, by itself. But I'd be very happy with the strides he made, just on offense over the course of his rookie contract, especially, and I don't want to get too far off on a tangent, drafted 27th or whatever he was. He's outperformed that. Jalen Green's underperformed number 3 draft pick, but because of, where they were drafted, that's why the contracts have gone these different ways. But that's where I'm at on Cam Thomas offensively. Generally, he can help a good offense. It's just how much.
And you said that, he's a positive player offensively at this point, but that's not enough. And I think the reason that that's not enough in his player archetype is because of what you're giving up on the other end of the floor. And we'll get to that. But I do want to talk about the playmaking quickly, because we talked about the scoring. Obviously, that's been his calling card. But people have said, Offensively, he's going to have to be more of a playmaker to warrant having the ball in his hands that much. I think we've definitely seen improvement and growth from him as a playmaker. And, I don't know if that's saying all that much because he really couldn't go any further in the other direction. Like you can only go up from where he started out. So, I don't want to diminish what he did, but I think we still do. If you just look at the numbers, there's a lot of advanced numbers on it. He passes the ball and generates potential assists less compared to how much he has it relative to a lot of his other guard counterparts. And I do think even in that stretch at the end of the season where he was passing more and he had a lot more like 6-7 assist games, there were a couple of really big moments down the stretch of games that were close where he was missing wide open passes. And it seemed like it was just going up no matter what. So how do you feel about his playmaking growth overall?
You look at the numbers and you look at some of the film, and granted, a lot of the playmaking is like, basic kind of pick and roll read. Not basic, but you're hitting the roller. And then if this guy comes over, you're hitting the corner. And those are good and valuable passes, but it's regimented offense. When you watch these games, it's like, it's what you just said. It's like, if it gets close, if we're in clutch time, if it's like a dynamic situation, if he, catches it on the wing and it's kind of a scrambled play, you probably don't trust him to like read the floor. And there are these modes where it's just like, okay, this shot's going up. Like he's not going to pass until it is the last option. And when you are probably project to be at the highest level, a little bit more of an off-ball scoring guard, catch and shoot threes, some side pick and rolls, stuff like that, it's just easy to game plan against.
Mm-hmm.
And that is really why the offense will leave you wanting, even though we see the lobs and the dump offs to Nick Claxton. Like that is great, but it just doesn't feel like, and I don't want to say ever because he's 23, whatever. He's only played 4 years, but it really, gun to my head, it doesn't feel like the offense is going to reach a point where he's tough to game plan against in that sense.
And I understand that. And I think, for me, from the passing perspective, I think it's always been a willingness. And I think like he shows it in flashes and he might do it just enough for people to say like, look, he had this many assists in this game and it's improving. But I do think that it is what you said. Like a lot of the pick and roll stuff we see, he's operating in the pick and roll, he's snaking, he's getting to his spots with the intention completely of shooting. Like he is not looking usually to get rid of the ball. And that's not always a bad thing. Like I love players who have that kind of confidence, but I do think there's a lack of willingness. And I think that will lend itself to some issues when you're trying to be an offensive engine and have the ball as much as he's going to. There are also obviously issues on the other end of the floor with defense that impact it. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk a little bit more about his offensive game and all the different areas that he's going to need to improve if he wants to be a starting caliber player in a playoff level rotation. So all that after a quick break. But before that, want to tell you about our friends over at OpenPhone. Guys, if you're running a business, you know that every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time you had an urgent need, maybe for a plumber or a service provider. If the first person didn't answer, did you wait? Probably not. You moved on. That's why you need OpenPhone. OpenPhone is the #1 business phone system built to streamline and scale your customer communications, all from an app on your phone or computer. Guys, OpenPhone lets me manage business calls and texts from a single app. The shared inbox feature is truly a game changer. Your team can jump into any conversation instantly without missing a beat, and their AI agent handles after-hours calls, answers common questions, and captures leads so you never miss a customer. Guys, OpenPhone is offering my listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. That's OPENPHONE.com/LockedOnNBA. And if you have existing numbers with another service, OpenPhone will port them over at no extra charge. OpenPhone, no missed calls, no missed customers. Coming back from the break on today's Locked On Nets episode, talking with Lucas Kaplan of Nets Daily about Cam Thomas and whether we think he is going to be a long-term fit with the Nets as a starting two guard for this team through their rebuild. And we talked about his offensive game. We're going to talk about the defense, but obviously, Lucas, the two knocks on Cam Thomas's game have always been, well, there was 3. The efficiency was part of it. I think that is scaled up to a point where it's good. It's, for how much he's shooting, it's above league average last year. that has improved. It's now the playmaking and the defense are the two big ones. We just talked on the playmaking a little bit, but if Cam is going to get to a level where he's going to be a starting caliber guard in a playoff level rotation, what do you think is a more important area of improvement, the playmaking or the defense?
That's a good question. Let me try to work my way to an answer. The Pacers in a lot of ways are a very atypical NBA team, but in many ways, I think we can agree that they're kind of where the NBA is and is going. They closed with any one of 8 or 9 guys even in these playoffs. Mathurin was kind of giving them the scoring punch they need. He would close games. Sometimes they needed Obi at the 5 or Obi and Miles. Sometimes Nesmith was really what they needed. Sometimes Nemhard sat. Sometimes he closed games. Point being, all these guys can kind of have enough skills to thrive in a variety of contexts. How many different types of lineups can you design around Cam Thomas? He kind of pigeonholes you.
It's not
way.
It's not very malleable, the skill set.
No.
It's you need to build a lineup around him. And that's one of the tough things is it limits the way that you can play, and it also limits the personnel and the different people that you can go after and the way you can build out your rotations.
Exactly. And that's why it's hard for me to answer that question because, if I had to, probably the defense, if he's suddenly a plus defender, you can stick him on ones and live with everything else. But the amount of curating you need his ideal lineup to be, it's you need a rim roller because his passes are really I can throw lobs against drop or I can hit the roll. So you need that guy. You need your wings and whatever guard is next to him to be able to guard the point of attack. And you need the other team to probably be playing somewhat of a offensive liability for him to guard. So that's just not really how we see playoff teams thrive. It's well, if we're going to play this player, then all these things need to go right. That's not OKC. That's not Indiana. You could argue that was some of New York's downfall because they didn't have that against Indiana. So when you ask me, playmaking or defense, what would be the real crux of his improvement? It's both. It's everything, and it sounds very negative about him. And I don't mean it that way, but it's hard for me to just distill one area, though. If I had to, it'd be defense.
Yeah, I agree with you. And if I had to, it would be defense also. And I also think that the criticism surrounding Cam's game, a lot of it just with the general discourse, the narrative that has followed him is ball hog. And you keep hearing that. And that obviously is about his lack of playmaking. And I think that has been an issue. And I think the process there has been an issue. But I think maybe the defensive end of the floor isn't talked about enough with him. Because if you're talking about him being an off guard, being this guy who's not going to be a or not going to be the star 1A level scorer on your team, the guys around that guy obviously have to be able to play defense. And up to this point in his career, Cam has just been a bad defender. I think it got a little bit better last season, but I think his playmaking, it was kind of a situation where you could only go up. The defense wasn't going to get really much worse, I don't think. And when I look at him on that end of the floor, it is interesting because he's smaller, he's shorter, he obviously has some limitations there. But for me, it's just the engagement and the want to just has not been there consistently. And I feel especially off-ball defense, he seems like a guy who falls asleep a lot, in my opinion. On the ball, I think it was a little bit better last season. But still just leaving so much to be desired. And if you're going to be that guy, he's just with the playmaking deficiencies and with just him being an undersized player and while he is an elite scorer, some of the limitations that he has as an offensive engine, you can't have that and be a bad defender. That's just, you're not going to have success with a guy like that starting in the backcourt, in my opinion. We just never really see that. So
no, and because it requires the team to make so many to protect this guy, in a lot of lineup constructions, without him scoring 30 on the most efficient shots and being an all-around offensive superstar. It is this compounding of issues. And well, you go ahead, you finish your point.
No, I mean, that was really my point. It's just this archetype is not being valued, and it's not being valued for a reason, because it's really hard to win with this kind of player. Yeah. It's really hard to craft rotations and build out personnel that surround this kind of player. And it's not It's just with the way the NBA is being played now, it's not a type of player that has really shown success. So that was my whole point.
Yeah. And I mean, someone asked me this at Summer League. It's like, when have we seen really great, truly, NBA championship caliber teams feature kind of this player archetype, or just a player like this, in their starting lineup? And like, the closest I can get, and this is going to maybe sound crazy to some people, like you could say Jaylen Brown, because a lot of his shots come from the same areas of the floor that Cam's do. Like, he will fall asleep on defense, not the greatest playmaker, but at the end of the day, like, he is a really good cutter. He's far more athletic, and despite the off-ball lapses, like, he gets into you on the ball. In that playoff run, he was providing value on defense, shooting, passing lanes, better rebounder. So like, and he won Finals MVP. I don't mean that. Yeah.
I'm just going to say, I don't think the defense is comparable, but I get where you're going with it. So
yeah. And even that being such a stretch. And I'm aware that's a stretch, but like that's the best I can come up with. And it's not very good.
Yeah. So
as a comparison,
it's tough, with CT. And I think that, the deficiencies on the defensive end of the ball, to me, are the thing that is more glaring to me. Like, I think that his offensive process and his playmaking is an issue, but defensively, like, we just saw the way that these playoff series were played. We saw how much guys get picked on defensively. We saw the Knicks, like, playing with Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns, just not be able to survive, and then just getting pick and rolled to death down the stretch of that game 6 and throughout that series. And when you have guys on the floor, like Cam Thomas, who can be picked on like that, the offense that they provide has to be at such a high level, and you also have to insulate them with such good defenders. It's just a lot of things that have to work in that favor, where, are you giving $20-30 million or, to a guy like that in a playoff caliber rotation? I'm just not sure I see it, but it could be possible. We'll talk about what we think the most likely outcome is. We'll talk about the fan discourse and a lot of other things when we close out Locked On Nets after a quick break. But before that, I want to tell you about our friends over at Game Time. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with family or friends? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Game Time makes it possible. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch. And they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. Guys, Game Time is the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB, making it easy to browse the app for any Yankees, Mets game you want to go to. Are you tired of endlessly scrolling to find the best deal? Game Time Zone Deal picks the best seats in your section for you. The seat views are right on the app before you buy, so you know exactly where you'll be. Guys, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Closing out today's Locked On Nets episode, talking with Lucas Kaplan of Nets Daily about Cam Thomas and his future and whether we think he will be a fit with the Nets as their starting two-guard of the future. And Lucas, I think up to this point, like, we've sounded pretty negative, I think. And I do. That's not me saying I don't like Cam Thomas, like, as a player. I like a lot of things about Cam Thomas. I love his confidence. Like, I think something I always value in a player is somebody who's not going to be afraid of the moment, not being afraid to step up and have the ball in their hands if necessary. I think Cam has shown no fear whatsoever in that regard. I think our critiques are him as a starting caliber player, him as a guy who's going to warrant having the ball as much as he needs to really take advantage of what his offensive gifts have been. And I think a lot of fans are probably going to have a negative reaction to what we're saying. So how do you feel just like about the fan discourse surrounding Cam Thomas? I'm always curious about it because I understand why fans like him so much. It's some of the same reasons that I enjoy watching him. The fearlessness, the showmanship, the scoring ability is obviously always going to be attractive to fans, but it does seem like there's a lot of fans who have disagreements with us about what Cam is and, where his place in the NBA is going to be long-term.
Yeah, I think it does sound negative because we're kind of we have probably the opinions that I think most of the NBA would have in terms of what his contract and role should be, and he probably doesn't share those opinions as he should not. Um, but that being said, like I've always thought about this, we are harder as a general kind of analysts, whatever, about guys whose best skill is scoring the ball
Yeah.
because it is the hardest skill to make a living off of in the NBA. It is the hardest skill to be as good as he is at it. Like, we can talk all-time Oak Hill leading scorer, LSU, 23 points a game, 3 40-point games in the NBA in a row as like a 20-year-old. It's incredible. And he is a very talented player. And when you're watching like these ridiculous shots go in over and over and over again, as he does from time to time, like in these games, or if he's on the road in Madison Square Garden and he's had a few performances where it's like, is this guy just going to score them into a victory? It's hard to watch that and be thrilled by it and then turn around and watch us say, well, he's like not that good because blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But, I think what we're saying is valid. It's just, if he had a different skill set, but was relatively the same sort of impact type of player, this wouldn't be the discourse. A, he wouldn't be trying to get $30 million. B, like there are, if he was a more defensively oriented and like kind of some off ball shooting, but couldn't really create, it's like you can have more of those guys on a roster at once. So I get the fan discourse, and I do feel bad that like I don't enjoy like just talking about him in the negative, like, well, he shouldn't get this. But that's what it comes down to for me. Like, it's just hard when this is your skill set and the things you need to improve upon are really the things that like supporting NBA players, like third, fourth, fifth best guys on a championship team really excel at. And in some ways, he's unlucky with that. He's unlucky with the timing. And I don't blame fans for watching a guy score 40 points on like just a ridiculous set of buckets and having that reaction. Like, this guy's awesome. I want to pay him. I want to watch him play basketball. I think that's probably the more common reaction versus what we're doing.
And let's say this, and we don't have too much time, so try to keep your response short if you can.
Okay.
But I think we're saying, if he's not going to be the 1A guy on this team, he has to improve in these other areas. And a question a lot of fans might ask is, why can't he be that 1A guy? Why can't he be like the lead guy on a championship team offensively? And if you were to succinctly, express why not, just what would you say?
Defenses are so good and so varied, and they will throw so many coverages at you. And that is not compatible with the areas of the floor he likes to score from, his kind of floor reading, processing, driving ability, just all the things that make a truly great offensive player. I think the burden is just too high for him to be that 1A caliber offensive star, in his career. And I know it's early to say that, but it's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, as a tough shot maker, a guy who, isn't necessarily reading the floor and, making his teammates better all the time, a guy who works a lot out of the mid-range, is getting to the rim actually less last season than he did in prior seasons. Just all those things, those are the same reasons for me. We've got a few more minutes here. Let's talk about where we think it's going to go with the Nets, because Cam has made it clear he wants, or not made it clear. I've heard things about his camp, and logically you would expect this for him to say he wants to be paid in that $30 million range like some of those other guards. He's not going to get it. He's going to, nobody can pay him above $14 million, which is the non-taxpayer mid-level exception. It doesn't seem like anybody is running to give him that full exception right now. So it's really what the Nets want to give him. And he has two options. He can take the Nets offer, which is reportedly somewhere in the 2 years, $28 million with the team option in the second year, or he can sign the 1 year qualifying offer and become an unrestricted free agent next summer. I have said, based on how this has played out, which regardless of which option it ends up playing out to be, the way this has played out and a lot of stuff before it has led me to believe that he is not going to be a part of the Nets' long-term future. Do you agree with that assessment?
I think he's on the team next year, but long-term future, probably not, especially, if you look at the Nets draft and all that.
Yeah, and I think if you look at the Nets draft, like I joked about this with Brian, it's like it's just really tough with CT, Brian Lewis, because I asked Sean about their draft picks right after the draft, and he gave us an answer describing all the traits that they were looking for. And I've joked that like it was kind of the antithesis of Cam Thomas. Like it was, Sean said 0.5 second basketball with the ball popping, it doesn't stick. And then he said sizable, versatile, multi-positional defenders and guys who make it hard on defense. And that's just, I would not say that those are traits with Cam Thomas thus far throughout his NBA career.
And I think the other thing that's changing a little is, people say, well, like sixth man, like score off the bench, microwave guy. And that certainly exists. Like that's a valuable, again, I think he's a positive offensive player. I think he can destroy bench units for a really good team. And like have 28 points in like 22 minutes. I've seen him do it before. But when we talk about high level teams, that's not really how benches operate anymore. It's not like this guy is going to come in and do this. Like your sixth, seventh, eighth guys now are like, how can you fit with the starters? How can you bring a different kind of look to our best lineups? It's not like come in and do your own thing, and then we're going to take you out at the end of the game. Like the most valuable bench players do both. They come in and they rock with their bench unit, but then if they're playing well, they give a different look. I just used the Pacers example earlier. And so I'm not saying that he can't even be like a great bench player and have a really defined role for a good offense, because I think he can, even if it isn't a starting lineup perhaps. But there's just a lot of things kind of working against him right now, and they're not his fault. They're not his fault, a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, and I think the point that you made about the bench guy it makes sense, because if you're going to pay a bench guy and it's going to be one of your top paid bench guys, why would you want a guy who could only operate as this, like, I'm going to carry the second unit, I'm not going to be like a complementary piece around your starters? Ideally, you're going to want a guy who can do both. I still think there is a lane, as you said, for CT to bring a lot of value in that area. And he could be a starter. Like we could be wrong on this. And a lot of this is probably sounded negative. And I think it's tough because in his case, we're framing the conversation in, can he be a starting caliber guard on a championship or a playoff level rotation, which is
so hard.
It's a really hard bar. Yeah.
It's so hard to
And I'm saying, like, this is a guy, CT, who was picked at the very end of the first round. Like you said earlier, he's already exceeded what the expectations were based on where he was drafted, and he's going to have a role in the NBA for the foreseeable future, which is a win. Like, that's a win. But I think because he has this scoring ability, the discourse has become about something so much more with him. So I think it's tough in that regard.
It is. It's scoring ability. It's always been tough, especially in the last like 10, 15 years, for NBA fans to talk about guys whose best skill is scoring, for a lot of reasons. But maybe that's for another day, another podcast.
All right, Lucas, I appreciate you taking the time as always. We will see how the Cam Thomas contract situation plays out. It doesn't really have to, reach a conclusion anytime soon. It may drag out a lot longer. So I'm sure we'll have you on to have more talk about CT and the Nets' other rotation players. But thank you for taking the time, man. That does it for today's episode of Locked On Nets. Hope you guys enjoyed the talk with Lucas, touching on everything relating to Cam Thomas's future and whether he'll be a core piece with the team moving forward. If you guys do not already, subscribe to Locked On Nets wherever you get your podcasts, whether Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Also, hit up the YouTube channel. If you enjoy my content, smash the like button, please. Only takes a second. Means a lot. Really helps with engagement. Also, leave a comment. Let me know what you think about Cam Thomas's future, whether he should be a piece with the team moving forward, whether that's a starter, a bench piece, what contract he should get. I want to hear from you guys about all that. I'll try to reply. But we have a lot more Nets news going on. We have potential moves left with the team's cap space that could be made. We have the futures of all the rotation guys, the guaranteed, non-guaranteed. So I'll have all that and more here on Locked On Nets when I'm back tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.